So, welcome back everyone to our final session of today in this beautiful Helmholtz Information and Data Science Virtual Career Day for the ones logging in for the first time. My name is Andreas. I'm happy to guide you through the program to the end of the program now. And now we will have a very nice discussion with two distinguished colleagues discussing careers in data science and the combination with the fields of earth, environment, and matter. For the ones of you logging in for the first time now, we will collect your questions to the panel and to individual members of the panel in the chat that you can find in the dashboard on your side, maybe here, maybe there somewhere. So just put your questions in there, and after the introduction of the panel, we will read the questions out loud. So let me introduce the panel to you. With us is Lennart Schmidt from the Helmholtz-Centre for Environmental Research, UFZ in Leipzig, and Michael Stückelberger from the German electron synchrotron DESY. It's great to have you guys with us. Thank you for concluding this beautiful day and bringing your expertise to the table and bringing the information to our large audience. What career opportunities are there with your platforms, with your schools, with your center, utilizing information and data science technologies. So we would love for each one of you to briefly introduce themselves, their line of research, and especially what kind of technologies and tools from information and data science they apply. So Lennart, you want to start us out?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, thanks for having me. Yeah, my name is Lennart. I'm from the Helmholtz-Centre for Environmental Research in Leipzig. So I'll just give a quick introduction about the center itself. It has 3 locations, in fact, about 1,000 people, and as the name already suggests, we do research on everything that is related to the terrestrial environment, so every environment aspects that are on the actual land cover of the Earth. So that includes all kinds of ecology, hydrology, so water sciences. We've got analytical chemistry, so environmental chemistry. We've got biotechnology. We even have sociology, economics, and then there's a big hi Tim. There is a big part of our research is focused on models and monitoring, so the whole simulation data science part. That's where I'm located. By education, I'm a hydrologist myself. So I've studied doing research on the water cycle. In general, that's where I moved into data science as well, for a lot of machine learning. And that's how I ended up in the center in the first place. Doing research on interpretable machine learning in the field of hydrology. By now I've moved over to a group on research data management where I'm mostly occupied with quality control of data. So we've got a lot of sensors out there. We've got several sites with thousands of sensors measuring all kinds of variables like soil moisture, temperature, tree height, you name it. And as these sensors produce errors, my job is to basically find the outliers in those time series data so that our researchers can actually use the data afterwards. That also includes gap filling. So we've got a couple of projects on climate data where we use sort of the spatial-temporal relation of different sensors to fill gaps that occur if sensors drop out.
All right. Thank you, Lennart. It sounds very interesting. We'll come back to that. Michael, what about you?
Hi. Yeah, thanks for having me here. I'm Michael, working at the German synchrotron DESY. This is not where I'm originally from, so I'm from Switzerland, was then in the US, and ended up like 2 years ago at DESY. In DESY, we have different departments. There is a department for high energy physics, so it's like the hardcore physics, particle physics. We have astrophysics. A lot of very, very fundamental research. So there is, when I'm saying, well, I'm doing like applied science, this is true when talking to a particle physicist. When I'm talking to an environmental scientist, I would say, well, this is pretty much fundamental research what I'm doing. So I'm in the photon science department, so I have nothing to do with particle physics, although I'm using X-rays to image whatever we want. So we have the most brilliant synchrotron worldwide here in Hamburg, and we're focusing the X-rays with different measurement methods. We can image particles from atomic scale up to well, biological samples like mammals. And within that, I'm looking at solar cells specifically. So I'm developing methods for X-ray imaging to investigate solar cells to make them better. Solar cells, but also battery materials. And this is where the environment comes into play. All types of everything that is related to energy harvesting, energy conversion, but also geological samples, because at the end of the day, it doesn't matter what we image. We get an image, whether it is a solar cell or a biological sample or a battery. And then the question is, what do we do with these images? Somehow we have to analyze them. We get big data. We have a lot of images. We want to somehow systematically analyze them. And this is where the data science comes into play. So this is what I'm doing now.
So we'll find the technology bridging Lennart and Michael in a minute. But now I'm very happy that Timm Schöning joined our panel with just a brief delay. Timm, we were so excited about starting out that we started without you. But maybe you can also take 90 seconds or something like that to briefly introduce you and your work that you do at GEOMAR, the Helmholtz-Centre for Ocean Research in Kiel.
Yeah, thanks very much, and sorry for being a bit late. I hope you can hear me. So I'm a computer scientist by training, actually. I started at the University of Bielefeld, very far away from the ocean, especially very far away from the deep sea. And there, I did my undergraduate and graduate in computer science with the side subjects of natural sciences. So I actually had the combined training of both fields. And then I did a PhD there on machine learning for image analysis. And since 5 years now, I'm at GEOMAR, which is one of the 5 most influential marine research institutes in the world. We as an institute operate several of the large German research vessels. We organize several research expeditions in a year. And we address many of the topics in natural sciences, so Earth system modeling, climate research. But also there's a lot of innovation going on, for example, regarding marine robotics. And I'm somewhere connected to all of these. So I have spent roughly 3/4 of a year at sea already. Usually it's about one month per year that we spend out there working on various of these research topics. And actually, I'm currently preparing my first own expedition on one of the big German vessels, which will start in 2 weeks into the Atlantic Ocean. And since my PhD, I have been working on image analysis. So it is still about this topic, acquiring images from the oceans, from the water column, from the seafloor, and trying to make sense out of them. So really to extract the information, what can be seen in the images. And the really nice thing is I can work with biologists, I can work with geologists. So all the fields that use imaging in the oceans are potential collaboration partners.
Amazing, amazing. Data science and a sailor.
Exactly.
That's fantastic. All right, guys. I mean, if I look from a domain perspective, these are like 3 completely different fields that you're working in, but maybe let's try to figure out what the common denominator is technology-wise. So I hear from Michael and from Timm, and maybe a little bit from Lennart, that you're working with data acquired from images. So can you maybe explain to the crowd a little bit how do we approach this? In what kind of format is this data? How do you transfer it to something that you can actually run some pattern recognition or some analytics over? Michael, maybe you can start us out. What is imaging sciences for you?
Oh, everything is imaging. I think technology has really made big jumps. So whatever technique we're using a decade ago, we can do now with greater spatial resolution or spatial resolution at all. So before it was not possible to scan samples to do images, and now all of a sudden we have higher X-ray intensity and we can image things, which gives entirely new dimensions to the research we're doing. So as I said, so we're mainly looking at X-ray images, but that does not really matter. So whether we are scanning a sample and then we're acquiring point by point a data set, these are very often multidimensional. And then the image is just maybe a 3D representation of the data set, But we can talk about images, even if they are not taken in spatial resolution. We can talk about time and even weird dimensions, temperature, and treat these data very much like images.
Okay, so could I imagine an array of sensors as Lennart described it as a picture?
Absolutely, absolutely.
Yeah, very much. I was just about to say that actually. I mean, I guess from a data science perspective, everything that can be treated as an image somehow that is located in some kind of raster basically goes as an image. So we've got sort of similar problems actually, or similar research going on with people. We've got some of our researchers do monitoring of forests using LiDAR, so that's basically drones or planes that fly, and then they have their those lasers that basically measure the whole forest. So that gives a 3D point cloud, or if you look at it, it's 2D, it's a couple of images. So those are sort of similar problems. Or we've got a lot of species problems, for example, people taking photos of all kinds of butterflies, algae, whatnot, and all that going into that domain as well.
All right.
Yeah, and underwater, I mean, the case is pretty similar, I would say. So actually for us, we use really off-the-shelf camera systems. So cheap solutions like GoPros or standard DSLR cameras that we all use also private. But the tricky thing for us is always to make it watertight and also to make it pressure-proof. So as I said, we work in the deep sea. That means below 1,000 meters, more towards 4,000 or 5,000 meters water depth. And that means 400, 500 bar of pressure. So yeah, the tricky thing for us is always to put these standard cameras in a pressure housing. And then that also means we have to deal with all these nasty things, illumination problems. We have to bring our own lamps, of course. The deep sea is very dark. And that brings quite some challenges for the AI analysis afterwards. So there is a huge community working with terrestrial imagery, and unfortunately we can only apply some of their solutions underwater because, for example, attenuation is a big difference that discriminates us from the others.
That sounds a little bit like your problems, Lennart, right? Like having the noise and having the errors in the data. Did I hear that correctly?
Yeah, I guess that applies to many natural science domains in the end, right? Where you gather data, you get errors as well.
Truly spoken. All right, guys, this is a virtual career fair, so let's talk a little bit about career tracks. I mean, for me personally, it's very hard to choose which one of you has the most exciting domain that he's applying the modern technology in. But what would you say would be courses or like fundamental technology that I should be capable of handling when I wanted to work in your specific? Michael, you want to start us out?
Well, probably my opinion is biased. So when I was studying, there was computer science was still not as developed as it is today. There was no Helmholtz data school or things like that. So I'm happy with my background in physics when it comes to interpretation of data. So that's something that is lacking sometimes today when we're looking at images without interpreting the physical background. Which is amazing that we can treat images the same whether it's from X-rays or from the sea ground. On the other hand, it is important to consider whether it was X-rays or whether it was taken in a water environment. Otherwise, you're entirely wrong interpreting these data. On the other hand, so I'm lacking the computer part. So my programming is relatively poor. My statistics is even worse. So with that respect, I'd love to have a greater background in computer science.
Very honestly spoken. What about you, Lennart? What are most crucial skills that one should bring to be on board with you?
Yeah, I can pretty much follow up on that, what Michael said. So I think, working at the U of Z, of course, you need the domain knowledge. You need to understand the whole environment because quite often the things that you look at are connected to a couple of other factors, of course. But yeah, me personally as well, I figure that compared to an actual computer scientist, I'm still not as efficient, that's for sure. I mean, you do get into it just as much as the computer scientists gets into environmental sciences. But I think you're good to go if you've got a background in sort of computer science with this whole machine learning AI background maybe, and you've got experience in data analysis. And if you're interested in environmental sciences at the same time, you get sort of, if you're able to broaden your thinking back from your computer into the sort of environmental work.
So Tim, could you get behind that statement as well?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think also that a little bit of knowledge in the IT department, but also in the whatever domain it is you're working in is essential. So if I wouldn't know what isotopes are, I would have it very hard to follow, for example, many of the talks of my colleagues. So I need to know a little bit of that, but also, I mean, I am a computer scientist, so without any programming skills, I couldn't work. But what I think is most essential when looking at students working at us, at our institute with us, it's excitement. And excitement really doesn't matter what it is about. So we have the nice situation that we are at this boundary between the natural sciences for the Earth system and also the IT department, and whenever we see excitement in a person for either of the two or both, we try to place all their energy at this place where they are really most effective and most interested in. And then over time, knowledge grows and people extend their focus to other parts. Maybe they switch at some point. I don't think I will ever do a PhD in marine geology ever again, but yeah, still I'm learning every day, and it's still the excitement, I would say, that drives me, and it's not really the background knowledge that I had.
Okay, great. Okay, Victoria, I'm pretty sure we have some great questions in the chat as well.
Yeah, we do have some questions, and one very interesting question is from David. And David is asking, you are all to some extent analyzing images. What are some of the statistical techniques you use in your research?
Great question. Michael, you want to start?
Well, there is, I would not know a single statistical technique that we're not using. It comes from noise suppression from single photon detection, where we have really the statistical noise of random events happening. There is clustering with a simple machine learning methods up to statistical methods of having different parameters and how they influence each other. So we have strong bias that are due to physical reasons or due to the sample. So there's all different types of statistical methods that need to be used.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. What about you, Lennart? Broad approach like Michael, or do you have something more focused?
Yeah, I mean, we're pretty diverse in the topics that we cover, so there are pretty different approaches that I might not even know of what my colleagues are doing, but maybe to add from my side is that I think the things that I look at, so sort of climate, water, that all happens on a spatial scale, so you always have your land surface where it rains on, where the water goes somewhere, where you want to know where it goes, or whatever you're looking at. So you always have this spatial relation, and then you've got the temporal relation as well, because you always want to know, well, what it's going to look like in a couple of days ahead. So you always know that the rain from some days before will have an effect on today. So we've been using convolutional LSTM approaches, so where you combine this pattern recognition at spatial scale and then use the LSTM, so the long-term memories, to capture that temporal relation. I guess that's, for us, that's the most promising in most applications.
Does it go for you as well, Tim, or do you have some other techniques going on?
Yeah, I've had some time to think about it. So if I would have to pick one method to become very handy at GEOMAR, I would say know everything about random forests. For now, it is the method that is used in many different data domains, also within imaging, but also outside of imaging. for now. I don't know what the situation will be like in 5 years. I think, especially for my image analysis work, it is all about neural networks now, convolutional neural networks for detection, for classification. This has really changed the field, and it is still trickling into the ocean sciences. So if you're an expert in deep learning techniques, you will run through open doors.
That's great, Tim. We have some questions on this area as well.
Ji Wang is asking, what are the most crucial machine learning algorithms that you are all use on a daily basis?
So Tim basically said something about that. Michael, you have some